Welcome to Devotions from Israel, a 5-minute word of encouragement. Today's devotion comes from Genesis chapter 37 and 45. If you are interested in our Israel trips that I lead, or further information and resource on our ministry website, please go to biblicalisraeltours.com. You'll see it posted below. Also, we would appreciate that you subscribe to this channel if you like our teaching videos, and also hit the bell if you want notification of new material that we post. Once again, thank you for joining us for Devotions from Israel. The life of Yosef, or Joseph, is an interesting one. His father, Jacob, was a man of God. Joseph himself was the second youngest of all the brothers, and yet he was despised by his brothers because his father favored him. When we pick up the story in Genesis 37, we read that Joseph was in the vicinity of Dothan. This is actually an archaeological site in the northern part of the Hill Country of Ephraim today. But we know perhaps the story of how Joseph would be betrayed by his brothers. He would be thrown in a pit. He would be perhaps left for this caravan heading to Egypt, and yet they would tell, the brothers that is, they would tell their father that Joseph was killed and there was no more. And yet Joseph was very alive and now taken to Egypt, where he would endure all kinds of difficulties. He would be put into prison. He would be falsely accused. He would be one who could interpret dreams. All of this is from Genesis 37 and onward. And yet when we come to the special moment where during this time of Joseph really helping the Egyptians manage this time of famine and drought, eventually the brothers would come from Canaan, and they would come to this area of Goshen, this area near the delta of Egypt today, north of Cairo. And they would encounter Joseph. In fact, in chapter 45, when Joseph saw them coming, it says he could no longer control himself before all of his attendants. And keep in mind that at this point, Joseph now rose to the position of vizier, most likely a prime minister type of position, only second or so to the Pharaoh himself. Joseph was really blessed by God in many ways for his faithfulness to him. And now Joseph, this very important Egyptian dignitary, sees his brothers coming, the same brothers who betrayed him. And Joseph said this, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. Just think how special this reunion must have been. And Joseph wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household also heard about it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." Then when they had done this, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. Now do not be dismayed or distressed. Do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing or reaping. God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives with a great deliverance. After Jacob died in chapter 50, again Joseph is with his brothers, and he said this in verse 20, "But Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children.'" God has a wonderful way of working behind the scenes. Now, from Joseph's perspective, of course, this was a difficult journey, being betrayed by his brothers, being sold as a slave to Egypt, in Egypt, and the Egyptians, of course, really abused him, they falsely accused him, and yet Joseph would rise to power as the vizier. In now this tender moment with his brothers, he would reveal himself and say, God intended your harm, and yet for ultimate good. That's how life works, isn't it? God always intends for us to offer us blessing and goodness. And sometimes the pathway or the journey to that place is one that doesn't feel maybe too blessed or too good. Maybe we feel betrayed by people around us or even by God himself. But God has a purpose in everything. And in this case, Joseph realized it and shared it with his brothers, whereas they intended to harm him, and yet God was working behind the scenes already to preserve a remnant for him. So a wonderful story of intervention and blessing and goodness. So behind the scenes of life, look for the ways that God wants to bless you today. And he will do this in his timing and through the abundance of his grace. Until next time, shalom.